We finished with the Maccabees, and as we discussed last week, we will move over to the book of Job. We did not do a whole lot of wisdom literature. We did do the Psalms, um, but Job is part of the wisdom literature. We don't actually know who wrote the book of Job, um, and it may be a collection of authors. It seems to be a fairly ancient text. In some cases, people think that it goes back 1,500 or 2,000 years before Christ. Um, and if that is the case, then it's very possible that there were several editors who took the manuscripts and added elements to it over the years. Um, it is considered the wisdom literature, however, whereas most wisdom literature is prescriptive on how to live according to the law, meaning it tells us you should be doing this, you should be doing that. This is what wisdom is. Job actually gives an example of someone who has lived according to the law. So it's kind of unique in that regard. Although I think the intention of that is to being that example to tell us this is how you should be behaving as well. Um, so it is interesting. As much of this book is um, can be complicated. Whereas I've had other people read, I'm going to read because I'm going to stop a lot and comment on it. Going to be a little more like the Chrysostom method of teaching, in the sense that you read a line or two and then talk about those lines. So forgive me for not including everybody in this one, but it's just easier instead of having you read and stop and get be complicated. So chapter 1, there was a man in the land of Osiris, whose name was Job. Now, if you have read the book of Job, you know that that is not the land that he is credited as being. The Septuagint identifies it as Osiris. In all the other books, it's going to be identified as Uz, U-Z. Nobody knows where U-Z is, Uz, how we pronounce that. However, Osiris is in Edom, which in modern day terms is basically southern Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia. So a little south of modern day Israel, south of the Dead Sea. So he's in that area. That doesn't necessarily make him non-Jewish, but it doesn't necessarily make him Jewish either. But that's kind of the area that he is in um, geographically. That man was true, blameless, righteous, and God-fearing, and he abstained from every evil thing, which is quite a generous description of someone. Now he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and his cattle consisted of 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke oxen, and 500 female donkeys in the pastures. Moreover, he possessed a very large number of house servants. His works were also great on the earth, and that man was the most noble of all men of the East. So his characteristics explain his wealth and his family. He's a good person, so therefore he has all this wealth. He has a good family. Not to be sexist, but he has more sons than daughters. Why is that not sexist, but it's more practical in those days in particular? The men would be able to go out and do the work that was there. Women would be taking care of more of the home, just a practical thing. At least that's how people would have looked at it in those days. So he is a very successful man by worldly standards, but also because of his character, he has all these things. And these are all gifts from God. So his sons would visit one another and prepare a banquet every day and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of their drinking were ended, Job sent and purified them, and he rose early in the morning and offered sacrifices for them according to their number, as well as one calf for the sins of their souls. For Job said, lest my sons consider evil things in their mind against God. Therefore, Job did this continually. So there was unity in the family because of these banquets. There was constant, communication with each other. So it's a very harmonious, good. It's about as as ideal of a family as you could identify. And then Job protects his children through offering the sacrifices, right? He says, okay, lest somebody go astray, um, lest somebody go astray, I'm going to offer sacrifices. That way God will provide for them and they'll be okay. So all this is just the perfect situation. Then, as it so happened one day, that behold, the angels of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the devil also came with them. So, if we're envisioning this, because we have to envision this, we're humans, you're going to say, how is the devil in heaven with all the other angels?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the fathers talk about this and says, well, that really didn't happen. This is more figurative and things like that. Um, and that's all well and good. Again, this is a teaching thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that it happened. First of all, why are the angels coming to God? Angels are always with God. Obviously, they're always um, in the presence of God. What we're talking about here is these are angels that were ministering to men on earth. So they're reporting to God what they're interacting um, with the human, us humans here on earth. And the devil comes with them. The Lord said to the devil, "Where did you come from?" Very important. The devil can't,
Mm-hmm.
we are told that the devil can't even speak in the midst of God unless he's given permission or spoken to. He's that impotent in the presence of God. So, where did you come from? So the devil answered the Lord and said, I came here after going about the earth and walking around under heaven. So what is he doing? He's searching for people to tempt, right? So he's doing the same thing the good angels are doing, but he's doing it with different intentions. Then the Lord said to him, have you yet considered my servant Job? So a very
Yeah.
concerning line because it's God who says, by the way, here's this guy Job,
Yeah.
which means he could do the same thing to all of us.
Yeah. I give you permission.
Um, have you considered my servant Job? Since there is none like him on the earth, a blameless, true, and God-fearing man, and one who abstains from every evil thing. So even God identifies that this Job is a good person, which is again why he's been gifted this perfect, ideal life, is because of his goodness. So the devil answered and said before the Lord, does Job worship the Lord for no reason? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? Have you blessed the work of his hands and his cattle, and have increased in the land? But stretch out your hand and touch all he has, and see if he will bless you to your face. Then the Lord said to the devil, behold, whatever he has I give into your hand, but do not touch him. Thus the devil went out from the Lord. So God praises Job, which of course enrages Satan. He says, oh, of course Job loves you because his life is
Mm-hmm.
perfect. You put some temptation in front of him and he'll collapse. But notice Satan tempts God to act. Of course, it could happen no other way. That God is one who acts in all things. And he says, but God, yeah, remove your blessings. You touch him, you afflict him. But God turns around and says, no, not going to happen. But notice how he says here, he says, then the Lord said to the devil, behold, whatever he has, I give into your hand, lest Job be able to say, well, God, it is your fault that you took this away from me.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not God's fault. Um, Indirectly it is, but it's the devil that's acting on this.
So where it says God says to the devil, where did you come from? Is that more of a rhetorical question, much like in the Garden of Eden?
Mm-hmm. More of a rhetorical question. It's more of God giving Satan freedom to speak. So, the 13. Now there was a day when Job's sons and daughters were drinking wine in the house of their elder brother. And behold, a messenger came to Job and said, the yokes of oxen were plowing, and the female donkeys were feeding beside them. Then raiders came and took them captive and killed the servants with the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said to Job, Fire fell from heaven and burned up the sheep, and likewise consumed the shepherds, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, Horsemen formed three bands against us, surrounded the camels, took them captive, and killed the servants with a sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine with their elder brother. And suddenly a great wind came from the desert and struck the four corners of the house and fell on your children, and they have died, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So instead of little by little causing one calamity after the other, Satan just pours everything on poor Job and takes everything away from him in one fell swoop. He's trying to kind of overwhelm Job into reacting, for everything happening all at once, which is something that we kind of experience sometimes as well, right? And we have times when we feel like, oh, the weight of the world is on us. Everything's happening all at once. It doesn't, nothing stops, all those sorts of things. Again, wisdom literature is intended to be something that we can put ourselves into that position. Maybe not directly, but at least have a feeling like, okay, I can understand that it's something that I've experienced.
So this is, so just thinking about this, the first, when I read this before, it's like Christ uses the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Rich man has everything, Lazarus has nothing.
Mhm.
But then we remember Lazarus and we don't even know his name. Prodigal son, the father has everything,
Mhm.
and yet his calamity was he didn't have his son, and then his son came back, and that's going back to God. But it seems that Job had everything, and in spite of everything that he had, he was faithful
Mhm.
to God.
Right.
And so that to me is different than, and maybe I just heard you differently, but that everything was serene because he was a good person par excellence, and God allowed that to be.
Mhm.
And that to me sounds more of a, so like, to me there's a difference with that. Am I just thinking it wrong, or
Well, it is that God blessed him because of his faithfulness and his goodness. It doesn't mean that just because we're good that we are going to be blessed.
yeah?
And that's so yeah, so it's not a one-to-one thing in that regard.
Mhm.
Sorry, I gotta get somebody back in. It's not a one-to-one thing in that regard. It's a if we are faithful, if we do good, then God will bless us. But it's not a guarantee, and it doesn't mean that tragedy or evils won't befall us. So it's but the point of this literature is to say, if you want good things in this life, do good, and God will bless you. It's not a guarantee. It's not a
But his blessing, you just like that, like why do bad things happen to good people?
right,
And
and that's
we don't know why we have, and then you even preach frequently, the reason we have the poor is for our salvation, so we can provide for them,
correct.
and we can be kind and doing good works, but they are poor.
Mhm.
And but that doesn't mean God doesn't bless them, because
Correct.
the people that are here to provide for them, that could be their blessing, right?
Yeah, I mean that's their blessing is through us, right? And we're going to see that in a couple of chapters when his friend starts talking to him and starts to kind of poke and prod on this and says, well, maybe you're not as good as you think you are, and maybe this is because, whatever, but what we're going to see about that. But yeah, Yeah, Job never, Jeannie says, Job never took his aim off the Most High, correct? And we know that in all good things, God works for the good of those who love him. We've been called according to his purpose, Romans 8:28, correct? Like I said, it doesn't mean that it's not a one-to-one thing. It's not a causation thing, but yeah, it but then again, I mean, we'll get to this all at the end. I don't think this is a spoiler alert. With his faithfulness, it is restored, right? I mean, so there's that element of things, but we are in the midst of temptation sometimes as well. So, in spite of all that happened, Job does not utter an inappropriate word. Because yes. So then, 20. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved off the hair of his head. And he fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away, as it seemed good to the Lord. So also it came to pass, blessed be the name of the Lord. And all these things that happened, Job did not sin against the Lord or charge God with folly. So yeah, so in spite of all that happened, Job does not utter an inappropriate word. I cannot say that I have followed that always. I think all of us at times are
Yep.
not quite as good with that. Um, he is naked. When he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. Obviously, he's going to be buried with burial clothes. But we're talking about here it's naked in sin and evil. He doesn't ever attach himself to sin. He doesn't clothe himself in sin and evil as sometimes we do. Um,
In
yeah,
the note, it said that he did all the things according to Saint Hezekiah, less as a sign of mourning than to get rid of what passions were left within him,
Possession.
less possessions, thus leaving the enemy no means by which he could further test him.
yeah. I mean, take it all. So, which is one of the reasons we cut hair at a baptism, right? I mean, or a tonsuring is what do we have? We're naked. We have our hair. Well, we can offer that if you take that off as well. Um, some of us have more hair than others, but yeah, it's an offering in that regard. Um, and he says, as it seemed good to the Lord, so it came to pass. He accepts that this is what God wanted from him, and he identifies that even though it's the devil that's doing the work, it's God that still permits it, if you will. So in all these things that happened, Job did not sin against the Lord or charge God with folly. He's not saying, this is, inappropriate or whatever. What have I done, sort of thing. So,
Can I say something, Father?
yep.
Well, I've been doing a lot of studying, and of course, I didn't tell you about this part, but I have this chapter in my book about the 19 stories that we're misreading in the Hebrew text. And I do dig into the whole Elohim thing, you know.
Mm.
And so when you dig into that, you know, is it the Most High, or is it one of the divine councils that have fallen, that is, that's stirring up the trouble and this kind of thing? So even with the story Job, if you look at the Greek, it says, what is it? The angels of God. So it's like divine counsel. So is it God the Most High, or is it, you know, those who were on the divine council that fell, that decided that they would stir up the trouble, like so much that happens in our world today? And also, I wrote about 19 different stories that, they actually named some of these, and I have a real shocker, so I'll save that one for later. But seriously, what people think is God, which God, and there are people that are actually praying to names that are Elohim, not the Most High. So I mean, this is a real problem in our world. Anyway.
So when I say that, nothing happens outside of God's view, right? So, it's still God, however you want to say it, permitting it, allowing it, overseeing it, managing it, whatever you want to use for that. But as we said earlier here, Satan tempts him. You take away from him. God doesn't do it directly, right? He says, no, 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 Satan, if you're going to do this, it's going to be through your hands. So yeah, I mean, all the negativity that's out there, is happening because of the devil, because of our sinfulness. So,
Mhm.
but it's still part of divine providence. And God, the other element of that is God still uses it for the good, right? I mean, he did have Judas betray him, but without that betrayal, we aren't saved. So,
Right.
if again, I don't want to give the impression that there's causation from God. But no, it's the excuse me, the devil doing his work, and the fallen angels, and they're the ones, as you say, are stirring up the trouble. And yes, we have to be very careful um, what we think is from God per se, and what is happening because God allows for it to happen. Again, in the end, when we're in the midst of tribulation, we're still in the midst of it. We don't know what is on the other end of that, and sometimes we have to get through the tribulation in order to understand why the tribulation took place. So,
It's interesting, we oftentimes want to give God the credit, if you will, for the bad things that happen to us, but not, and then, like negate the good. Even like, I don't know what the battle was, but Constantine uh, was given shown the sign of the cross, and he carried the cross and he won.
right,
And you you put those together, and it's like, well, he won because God wanted him to win.
right,
And that was God's will for him to win. But you look to a historian, they're not going to say that,
no,
right? But in a minute, we'll say, well, that tornado came and destroyed my home because, God, why didn't God do something?
right,
Um, but yeah,
right. Yeah. Well, we have no problem blaming God for things,
yeah.
um, but we won't take responsibility for what our part is, and we don't identify that you know maybe this was whatever happened was some because of evil, not necessarily an evil person, but because of evil in general.
Because we aren't in paradise.
Right.
Yeah.
And the only time that, after the afterlife, we'll be back by God's will, we'll be back in paradise.
Right.
And then those things aren't going to happen.
None of those things happen exactly. So, um,
Well,
so
aren't we supposed to have heaven on earth? Isn't that the Lord's Prayer that we're praying for that and so does it have to be in the afterlife? That is my really big, conundrum there. I mean, can't
so
we
no,
participate now and make
you,
heaven on earth now?
you can participate, you can experience heaven on earth. You can also experience hell on earth.
Mhm.
But it's a fleeting experience. The Lord's Prayer, "Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," means what we're praying there really is we're asking for the second coming to come. So the only way we're going to have lasting heaven on earth is after the judgment. So it's actually a prayer for the end times. So yeah, which most people don't realize. You say the Lord's Prayer, and it's like, oh, you do know what you're asking for, right? Um,
Mhm.
so okay, so chapter 2. Then again, as it so happened, another day, the angels of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the devil also came among them to present himself before the Lord. What's interesting here is each day and every day the angels are presenting themselves to the God and reporting, right? So this is God's activity. He's consciously watching over the things on earth. He is an attentive God. Um, which is why we can do liturgy every day. In monasteries, for example, they will do liturgies every day. Um, so that this is what's happening on a daily basis. And again, the devil's kind of tagging along. Um, so the Lord said to the devil, "Where did you come from?" Then the devil said to the Lord, "I came here from walking around under heaven and going about all the earth." Then the Lord said to the devil, "Have you considered my servant Job, since there is none like him on the earth, an innocent, true, blameless, and God-fearing man, and one who abstains from every evil thing?" And so it's not so much God gloating here, but he's kind of reminding the devil that, hey, you said if you took all these things from him, he would not be the person that he is. Um, you know, have you considered and seen he hasn't sinned? Um, you were wrong. Then, moreover, he still holds fast to his integrity, though you told me to destroy his possessions without cause. So, he's calling the devil out there. Then the devil answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin, whatever a man has, he will pay in full for his life. Yet truly stretch out your hand and touch his bones and his flesh, and see if he will bless you to your face." So the Lord said to the devil, "Behold, I give him over to you, only spare his life." So we'll pause there. Satan is not ashamed. He's not ashamed that he was wrong, not ashamed that a human bested him there. Uh, and he acts as if he was as if the calamity that has befallen Job is somehow not serious enough, as if your whole family just got wiped out, all your possessions, that's nothing. Get over it. Not quite what I would consider to be a simple thing. And so the Lord says, "Fine, I'll give you his body then as well." Um, So he took a potsherd thus the devil went out from the Lord and struck Job with malignant sores from head to foot. So he took a potsherd to scrape away the discharge and sat on a dunghill outside the city. So Job's body is revolting and stinking. He's not somebody you want to be around. So he sits outside the city. He becomes a spectacle to everyone. And that now again, I'll just go back to what we say at the beginning of the Old Testament. We read everything through the lens of Christ. How did Jesus die? Outside the city, a spectacle to everyone, similar situation. So again, Job here becomes sort of
with wounds on his skin.
with wounds. Yeah, he becomes. Job is a precursor for Christ, a model for Christ. So,
But so you can even say that before Christ's ministry, when he went into the desert for 40 days, God the Father gave the devil an opportunity to trick him,
tempt him.
to tempt him, because the devil couldn't have just done that
Right.
without God saying, "Go ahead,
Right.
see what you can do with my son." And he failed.
He failed. He failed miserably. Exactly. So when a period of time passed, his wife said to him, "How long will you hold out, saying, 'Behold, I will wait a little longer, looking for the hope of my salvation'? Listen, your memory is wiped out from the earth, your sons and daughters, the pangs and pains of my womb, which I suffered in vain with hardships. You yourself are sitting down, spending the nights in the open air among the rottenness of worms, and I go about as a wanderer and a handmaid from place to place and from house to house, waiting for the setting of the sun, so as to rest from my labors and pains now beset me. But say a word against the Lord and die." And so she must have had a life insurance policy out on him. Then Job looked at her and said, "You have spoken as one of the foolish women speaks. If we had accepted the good things from the Lord's hand, shall we not endure evil things? In all these things that happened to him, Job did not sin with his lips against God." So even his wife is now turned against him. Um, you can imagine, they have no place to live. She has to, find places to live, and she's waiting for her death. Um, and she wants him to curse God and die. But of course, he doesn't do that. And Job kind of understands and says, basically, God can do as he wishes. He blessed us, and now he can take it away. It's within his purview, any of these things, which is important for us to remember as well. Not to get too tied to things in our life, because bad things can happen to us too. Now, when Job's three friends heard of all the evil things that had come upon him, each one came to him from his own place. Eliphaz, the Temanite king, Bildad, the Shuhite ruler, and Zophar, the Namathite king, for they came to him with one accord to visit and comfort him. And so notice again, it's three of them,
Kings.
three kings.
Mhm.
They come together, not, they obviously coordinated here. Now, when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they cried with a loud voice and wept. Each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke to him, for they saw that his affliction was terrible and very great. So several symbolic things there. We've talked about the threeness, the 7 days, 7 nights, of course, is the fullness. So they were there with him, um, and spent time with him, and they didn't recognize him, which is kind of also interesting because, again, the disciples and apostles didn't recognize Christ after the resurrection from time to time. So, so okay, chapter 3. This is where we start to have the dialogues. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed his day, saying, May the day perish on which I was born, and the night in which they said, Behold, a male child. May that day be darkness. Notice he's not saying, should die or any of those things. He's just saying, curses what happened on the day he was born. It's more the things that happened on the day that he was born and that he was included in that. May the day perish in which I was born, and the night in which they said, Behold, a male child. May that day be darkness, and may the Lord not regard it from above, nor may the light come upon it. And this is interesting. We're going to see this a little bit more here. Basically, what he's saying is this is kind of what has happened to him is sinful, not in a sense of justice or injustice. It's more of an evil thing that this shouldn't happen to anybody, right? Family dying, losing possessions. It's a simple thing. The darkness of sin, and Job wishes it to be absence of light, to be total darkness, so that we understand specifically this is darkness, and there's no temptation for us to say, well, there's a glimmer of light there. Maybe there's some goodness here. No, this is complete sin. And that's the thing about sinfulness for us. We like to make excuses for our sinfulness. We like to say, well, we like to justify it. We like to add that glimmer of light into it and say, well, I'm doing this and I have an excuse for it. No, he's saying complete blackness so that we identify this is not be deceived. This is sin. We don't want to introduce light into it. Because as we all know, I mean, we do this at Pascha, right? You take a dark room, you just add a few candles, and it illuminates the whole thing, right? So it doesn't require a lot of light for us to kind of start to see it in the darkness. It reminds me of, again, Holy Week, the hymn of Cassiani, right? Darkness was, night was my time. I like to revel in the darkness. And this is, the emphasis of the Gospels, the emphasis on the light and the darkness in the Gospels, with the Holy Week theme of light and darkness. I mean, it's all right there. And so Job kind of contributes to that here. May that day be darkness. May the Lord not regard it from above, nor may the light come upon it. May darkness and the shadow of death seize it. May a cloud settle on it. May that day and night be cursed. May darkness carry it away. May it not come into the days of the year. May it not be numbered with the days of the month. But may that night be sorrow, and may no gladness come upon it, nor joy. But may he who curses that day curse it, even he who is about to subdue the great sea monster. So he's saying, I don't want this to be a temptation for anybody. I want everyone to see this as abhorrent and terrible. May the stars of that night be darkened, and may it remain dark. May it not come into the light. May it not see the morning star arise, because it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb, for it would have removed sorrow from my eyes. Why did I not die in the womb? Why did I not perish immediately when I came from the womb? Why did the knees receive me? And why did I nurse the breasts? For now I would have been lying down and quiet. I would have slept and been at rest. He's not being, again, he's not being suicidal here in this regard. He's not saying, I want to die. He's saying, if I had miscarried, my mother had miscarried, I'd be, what was happened, I wouldn't have experienced. If I had died, he's not saying these things are good things. He's saying, in this situation,
He'd never been born.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have suffered.
he wouldn't have suffered.
Mhm.
Exactly. And think about that, right? Who did Jesus say it would be better if that man had not been born? Judas, right? So it had to happen. And if it wasn't Judas, it would have been somebody else, right? Because it had to happen. But for Judas, it's not a good thing. For Job, this experience is not a good thing. It doesn't mean for us, again, it's not suicidal in that regard, but had I not lived, I wouldn't have experienced these things. With kings and counselors of the earth, or who were insolent with their swords, or with rulers who had abundant gold and filled their houses with silver, or I would have been like an untimely birth proceeding from my mother's womb, or like infants who never saw the light. There the ungodly have burnt out the fury of wrath. There the weary in body are at rest. There men of ancient times have ceased together to hear the voice of those who collect taxes. The small and great are there, and the servant who feared his master. Why is light given to those in bitterness, and life to souls in pain, who long for death but do not obtain it, digging for it like treasures, and would be very joyful if they could obtain it? Death is a rest to such a man, for God is against him. For groaning comes before my food, and I weep and am oppressed with terror. For the terror I was concerned about came to me, and what I feared happened to me. Neither was I peace or quiet nor at rest, for wrath came upon me. So again, we're all on the same path. We're all heading to the same place, and that is death. We're all going to die. Some of us are at different parts of that path. He's not, necessarily praising death. He's not saying death is a positive thing in general. But he's saying for some people who are in pain or other, death becomes a, a, a desirable end, a relief. Which is why we don't, in Orthodoxy, if somebody's suffering, we don't seek to end their life, but we don't do good extraordinary measures to make it continue either. Let life run its course. Um, so, but he's liking himself to all these people that we can kind of understand all these things from kings and all those down to the poor, all that sort of thing.
So at the end, he says, for the terror I was concerned about came to me, and what I feared happened to me. Neither was I at peace or quiet, nor at rest, for wrath came upon me. So he was concerned. He would pray for his children while they were, I mean, I don't know what that means, the time of their drinking, I guess debauchery. But he was praying for them so that they would not fall.
Right.
And so he's, saying, I feared this would happen,
Mhm.
and it did.
And it did.
And he's not blaming God.
Right.
He's just saying,
Stating a fact.
I was worried. It wasn't like I was ignorant that this could happen.
Yeah, and exactly. The purpose of the sacrifices was to protect his children, and of course, they didn't get protected. So yes, he was worried about it, and yeah, it's not a curse. It's not a blame. It's
It is.
This is what happened.
Yeah, it just is.
Um, and if anything, he's mourning it. And the wrath. We'll talk about wrath, I think, in a couple chapters there. Yeah, in a couple chapters there. So then, so this is Job's soliloquy on what happened. And so then his first friend, then Eliphaz the Temanite, answered and said, have you been often spoken to in distress? Meaning, when have you ever had a problem before? This is your
Yeah.
first time
How would you know?
dealing with calamity. What are you talking about? But now who shall endure the force of your words? For though you instruct many and strengthen the hands of the weak one, and raise up the sick with your words, and imparted courage to feeble knees, which is that is he saying that as a compliment, or is he saying it sort of tongue in cheek? You've done all these things, and you did all these things, but really, look what happened. Um, Yet now pain has come upon you and touched you, and you are anxious. Is not your fear your hope, and the integrity of your way of life changed into folly? Meaning, you did all these good things, and look what you got for it. Can you remember anyone pure who has perished, or true people who are altogether uprooted? According to what I have seen, those who plow harmful things and those who sow them will reap pain for themselves. Meaning, he's basically putting the blame on Job. This, you caused this. They will perish by the command of the Lord, and they will be destroyed by the breath of his wrath. The strength of the lion, the voice of the lioness, and the exulting cry of dragons are extinguished. The old lion has perished for lack of prey, and the cubs of the lioness have left one another. So he's basically saying Job must have sinned. He must have done something wrong. All the accolades that have been given to him previously, both by the writer and by God himself, must have been wrong. He must have done something to cause this, but of course we know that that's not the case. Um, but if there had been any truth in your words, none of these evils would have befallen you. Shall not my ear receive extraordinary things from him? But just as when terror falls upon men with dread at a noise in the night, shivering and trembling befell me and caused my bones to shake. Then a spirit came before my face, and my hair and flesh shook with fear. I rose but could not recognize it. I looked, and there was no form before my eyes, but rather a gentle breeze and a voice saying, what shall a mortal man be pure in the Lord's sight? So the friends of, the three friends of Job have been compared to being the image of heretics. That they sound good. They sound sweet in their words. They sound like what they're saying is true. Because there's some of this, if you just were reading it out of context, you would say, yeah, that's accurate. Um, but it's not accurate. So we have to be careful. Um, and then that one part there, 17, what shall a mortal man be pure in the Lord's sight, or blameless before him in his works? If he puts no trust in his servants, and if he observes a perverse way in his angels, how much more those who dwell in houses of clay, of whom we also are formed of the same clay? So what he's saying there, Eliphaz is saying, is that if the angels can fall, and they did, Satan being one of them, how much more can men fall? So there are good angels, but there's bad angels. So yes, you might have been, mostly good, but you clearly should, must have fallen and therefore deserve what has happened here. How much more those who dwell in the house of clay, of whom we also are formed of the same clay, does he not smite them like a moth? They no longer exist from morning till evening. They have perished, for they cannot help themselves. For he blows upon them, and they are withered. They have perished for lack of wisdom. Um, basically, Eliphaz is presenting to Job that he has hidden his sinfulness from men, but he can't hide his sinfulness from God. Maybe we all were um, you pulled the wool over our eyes, but you can't do that to God. And so this is why he has put this calamity upon you. Which, of course, again, is not the situation, but this is Eliphaz coming in. So, this is why, he sounds like the heretics because, it sounds good on paper, but it really isn't good. So 5, but call out if there is anyone who will obey you, or if you shall see any of the holy angels. For wrath destroys the foolish man, and envy slays one who is deceived. I have seen foolish people taking root, but suddenly their mode of life consumed them. May their children be far from salvation. May they be derided at the gates of worse people, and may there be no one to deliver them. So wrath destroys the foolish. For wrath destroys a foolish man. But the fathers say that wrath doesn't come to the sensible people. It doesn't come to people who are sensible. It only comes to foolish people. And then sinners take root so they may have time to repent. So what Eliphaz here is suggesting is God bless you with all these things, but you were doing bad things. And if you had repented, he wouldn't have done what he did, but you didn't repent. And therefore, this is the just cause of what you have done. And of course, the gate is Christ. We just heard the Gospel of John about he is the gatekeeper. 5, for the righteous will eat what they have gathered, but they themselves will not be delivered from calamities. Their strength will be exhausted, for trouble does not come from the earth, nor does suffering spring from the mountains. Yet man is born for trouble, as the young bird is born to fly to high places. So here, the earth cannot sin, for trouble does not come from the earth. The earth can't sin. It doesn't have any, rocks can't sin, nor does suffering spring from mountains. Yet man is born for trouble, so man can sin. And as young bird is born to fly to high places. And so basically young birds are sinners. Um, they continue in their sinfulness and fly high in that regard. But surely as for me, I will beseech the Lord and call upon the Lord and master of all, who does great and incomprehensible and marvelous things without number. He causes rain on the earth and sends water on all the places under the heaven. He sets the lowly on high and raises up the lost. And we hear this in the Gospels again, familiar phrases here. He frustrates the counsels of the crafty so their hands cannot carry out their plans. He catches the wise in their craftiness and subverts the cunning of the counsel of the cunning. Let them counter darkness in the daytime, and may they grope at noontime as though it were night. May they perish in war, but may the weak escape from the hand of the mighty. May the weak have hope, and may the mouth of the unrighteous be stopped. So all these things are accurate, right? He does all these things. These are true things. And yet sometimes they aren't true things, right? It's that nice edge where he can do all these things in a positive way, but sometimes it doesn't happen either. Again, the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And why do good people or bad people
Have good things.
get good things and succeed? So again, this is the friend that's not being so much of a friend. But blessed is the man whom God corrects. Therefore, do not reject the chastening of the Almighty. We know that there's hope and repentance, and this is again what Eliphaz is saying: is repent of what you've done, and maybe God will hear you. For he causes a man to be in pain, but he restores him again. He smites, but his hands heal. 6 times he shall deliver you out of troubles, and in 7 no harm shall touch you. In famine he shall deliver you from death, and in war he shall free you from the power of the sword. He shall hide you from the scourge of the tongue, and you shall not be afraid of evils when they come. You shall laugh at the unrighteous and the lawless, and you shall not be afraid of the wild animals of the earth. For the wild animals of the field shall be at peace with you. Then you shall know your house will be at peace with you, and your dwelling place there shall be nothing amiss. You shall also know your seed shall be many, and your children shall be like the grass of the earth. You shall come to the grave as a grain reaped in its season, or as a heap of threshed wheat harvested at the proper time. Behold, we have searched this out. This is what we have heard. Know for yourself if you have done anything wrong. And so there's kind of the last point. Eliphaz tells Job to examine himself to know what he did wrong. And we kind of know that this is how the thought was in Judaism at the time, if it's not today, that if you're good, you get blessings. If you're bad, you don't get blessings. We know that about, if you're barren, you must have done something wrong, don't deserve to have children. Of course, we know that's not the case, but that was the mindset here. And so Eliphaz is kind of coming to Job and kind of almost chastising him, telling, like I said, a lot of what he says there is correct until it's not, you know. Um, but Eliphaz doesn't have the fullness of the picture. He doesn't know why God is doing what God is doing. He doesn't have clarity there, and so therefore he's kind of speaking out of turn and in a way that really is not helpful or appropriate to the situation.
It's like it's a shame you're not. It's a shame you're not saved.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Too bad you're not saved.
Too bad you're not saved. Once saved, always saved, and it's a shame you're not. Yep, we try.
Yeah. And that's right. It's exactly. It's Eliphaz kind of passing judgment on Job when
If you just do this and say you were wrong and you sinned, just tell God that instead of just saying, I accept whatever you give me, God.
right, which is right. Eliphaz,
What
it's
Job is doing, right?
yes, it's not Eliphaz's position to be the judge here, correct? And yes, it's what Job is saying. If Eliphaz had come in and say, "Woe is me, I mourn with you in your grief," and yeah, but accept it because this is God's will for whatever reason.
But that's like Christ on the, take this away if it's your will.
Right.
And I'm sure people were saying, look, if you just say, oh, so sorry, made a mistake, you misunderstood me, I'm not the Son of God, you can keep living.
Right.
You'll be fine. And that's what it kind of sounds like to me. Is like he's just saying, just get in step with what everybody else says.
Right. Do whatever you got to do to make it right, and you'll be okay. And
even if you have to lie.
yeah, the apology that's not the apology.
Yeah.
Right. Um, the one I really like is when somebody says, "Well, I'm sorry if I offended you." Well, first of all, if you're saying
Yeah.
you're wondering if I was offended, if you're saying that you know that I've already told you that you offended me. But yeah, so it's not an if, but I'm sorry. It's almost like it's my fault for being offended. Or maybe it is my fault for being offended. But if I do come to you in a loving way and say what you said was not appropriate, well, I'm sorry if I offended you is not the right response. So that's not really the apology, right? It's like, oh, you were offended. That was not my intention. You can say that, but yeah, the apology, that's not the apology. And that's what Eliphaz is doing here. It's not the appropriate, it's not good counsel. He talks about folly when his counsel itself is folly. It's not appropriate. It's not good counsel. And that's again why we're in wisdom literature here, to learn what good counsel is and what good counsel is not. And again, all the things he says here about God aren't necessarily wrong. They just aren't right all the time, right? That's why I said earlier, Job is blessed by God because of his goodness until God takes it away. And Job understands it's God's right to do that. It was his right to give it to me, and it's his right to take it away. So it's not, and just because I'm good doesn't mean that God then you should bless me. So I read Job when I was 6 years old, and he was always my hero. Uh, yeah, it's a compelling tale, and like I say, I don't always, although I aspire to it, I don't always act it out. I think that's the challenge for us, is to aspire to follow him. So
Can I ask a question, please?
yes,
Father, even suffering, now that we're on Job here, I mean, we wouldn't really want to not call that, isn't everything we have a blessing? Everything.
Yes.
If we look at things in the sense that, we are aligned with God, and no matter what it is, so even in the story of Job, all these horrible things, of course, the, demons or whatever we want to call them out there doing these stirring up trouble stuff, it's still a blessing because of, well, what's the promise in Romans 8:28? All things for those who have been called according to, God's purpose. So in that way, wouldn't even suffering of sorts. I mean, of course, it's not pleasant, and no one wants to have to suffer, but isn't that part of all the whole picture? So
Well,
really,
yeah, and
that's my question.
that's the imagery given to us in the New Testament, right? I mean, it's, we're purified, metals purified in the fire. We're purified through our suffering, that we are, we attain salvation through our suffering. Um, it's, as I always say, when everything is smooth and good, and you know nothing's going wrong, it's like I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop. It's like, what's going on? Because
Well, so
this
did
isn't
Job.
appropriate.
So did Job, because he was praying for his kids.
He was still protecting himself. He's like, okay, well, yeah, something might happen here. And then when it happens, right? I mean, we have to have the right mentality. It's not like, oh, see, I knew something was going to happen. No, it's okay. Well, this is also part of it. But yeah, I mean, we have to suffer. Have to suffer. It's important for us to suffer, um, because again, you mentioned earlier, the rich man and Lazarus. If Lazarus didn't experience what he had, he wouldn't be in the bosom of Abraham, because the rich man certainly wasn't. You know. So
But I think orthodoxy is not afraid to say you're going to suffer.
mhm.
And I would tell some of the residents in the ICU, so in a pediatric ICU, you've got a bunch of kids from birth until older, sometimes we even had them in their 20s, 30s because their doctors were there. And one day I said, life is unfair and we're here to suffer.
Mhm.
And one of the residents said, Dr. Storgen, that is so wrong. And I said, well, look outside of the door for the room that we're sitting in here doing our charting. Is this fair that
Right,
these children are here suffering and their parents are suffering?
right.
And the translation of patience is long suffering. And that's one of the gifts.
Yeah.
And some of us, that's our gift, is long suffering. And so if that's a gift, then
Yeah,
and anytime you have anyone you care about, you suffer for them. And I think a lot of Christianity wants to ignore that suffering.
right. Yeah, they want to bypass it.
Yeah.
I think to an extent, being a parent is long suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, my mother always, and she continues to say it, I will always be your mother.
Uh-huh.
True. This is true. You will always be my mother. But, you know, it's when she, as I was in my 20s and 30s, and would still harp on me, it's like, I'm an adult now, Mom. But that's part of being a parent, right? You're still, just because I became an adult myself and moved on in life doesn't mean that she doesn't worry about me. And we do the same thing with our kids. It's just the reality. In my research on this, I came across a passage that Saint Basil was writing to a father who had lost a infant child, and Saint Basil was saying, "You're hastening toward your grave. Your son's already in the grave, but understand he's also with Christ now. He is at rest, and you're mourning and suffering right now, and you're looking for that rest yourself, but he's already there." And so it's death for us is a tragedy. I mean, it's rare that we don't think of it as a tragedy. Certainly, a young person, we think of it as tragedy. Older people, even at 100 years of age, it's like, oh, you know, but
I'm
death
shocked
for,
they died.
yeah, but death for the person who's died is rest. I mean,
Yeah.
this is where, yes, it means that maybe that we suffer loss, certainly, and we can mourn that loss, and that is part of the human condition. But that doesn't make death a bad thing in and of itself.
And and
No.
like when in paradise, Adam and Eve and all the other people had no reason to know suffering
Correct.
because there was no suffering.
There was no death.
There was no death. And that because of the fallen state where we are, there is death all the time.
Right.
And there is suffering. There was no sickness. There wasn't anything that you would know. And it's like, even little children very early, ouchie mama,
Hmm.
just some little tiny nothing.
Yeah.
And they'll tell
And they scream their
you,
head off.
yeah. Um, but what you read from what Job said is that, if only I hadn't been born,
Right.
I would have been at rest. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
have to suffer this. But that's the way it is.
That's right. But that's it. Now here's the thing. I mean, right? So the fall takes place, right? Before the fall, Adam and Eve in paradise, there is none of those negative things, no death, just eternity. The fall happens. Imagine now we have sickness, illness, suffering, all those bad things, but there's no death
Yeah.
for eternity. That would be a great curse.
But that's what happens if you are in the dark.
Yes.
If when you die, you don't go to paradise. And that I think is the greatest fear.
Right.
Mhm.
So death becomes for us a excuse me, a release, if anything, where now there is the opportunity in death for there to be life.
Mhm.
And that's what Christ, obviously through Christ, prior to him, no, but through Christ, that's what we offer. And so again, we see death primarily, and I think again, like we were talking, Western Christians in particular see death as in purely negative terms, where Orthodoxy does not. And not to say that we embrace death, but we don't, look at it in such negative terms. Some people are amazed that we do open caskets for funerals. Excuse me. And we do that so that we're not ignoring the fact that this is going to happen to you. I mean, among other things, it's also helpful for closure on a psychological level. It's also helpful to see that the person is different. Something has happened, that the soul has left the body, and there is a change. Um, but yeah, death is not the big terrible thing because again, the only way to achieve salvation is to die.
It's actually God being merciful.
There is mercy.
That's why we're removed. It's like, lest they find the other tree and live this way in eternity.
Yeah.
And even the age, it used to in the Old Testament is 900 years old.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, we don't need to let people suffer that long. We're going to fix it a different time. So it's
But
God being merciful,
Yes.
saving us from suffering.
And even Simeon was like relieved. Oh, finally.
Let me die now.
All
Yeah.
these
Finally
all
go.
these people have died and I'm still here.
Yes.
Finally, I've seen the salvation.
Exactly.
I mean, can you, that's what a lot of science fiction and monster movies are, is that you never die.
Right.
And there's a lot worse things than being dead, I think.
Mhm. Well, Father Bear, on a blessed memory, would often on his birthday or whatever, we say happy birthday, God willing, I'll live to be that age. He said, with health. He always with a caveat, because it's like, it's one thing to live 95 years old, but what if the last 20 years are in
Yeah.
just terrible sickness, or,
Right.
you have
You lose your mind.
Alzheimer's or something where it's not a enjoyable existence. So, not that we seek for death or wish for it, but um, when it comes, I mean, that we're ready for it is the goal. So,
We don't have to hurry because it's
no,
going to come.
exactly.
But really, the speaker, what's his name?
Telepause.
Eliphaz. What a name.
Yeah.
He's like someone he maybe doesn't have all the things that Job had, but he's also seems like someone who is oblivious
Mhm.
to, if you just say this, it'll be fine.
Mhm.
No, it doesn't happen that way. Sometimes and I think you have to wait till the judgment day, but he's like a teenager,
Mm.
like not really putting it all together. Just
Right.
saying, look, buddy, you're my friend. I'm going to help you out here.
Yeah.
Do this.
Phil, you know what you did.
Yeah,
You must know something. You know what it is. Think about it.
yeah, exactly. So,
Well,
So-
poor Job sitting on the dung.
yes.
Yeah, Mrs. Job wasn't real nice to him either.
No.
Well, it's interesting that everyone disappeared except his wife, who was pretty angry.
She was not listed in
Because,
his possessions either.
Mm-mm.
yeah, and he didn't pray for her.
Mm-mm.
I guess he deserved to hear her complain.
He could no longer provide for her either. So,
Yeah, she was
Yeah,
kind of like
thing,
stuck.
listing, the sons, it's the wife was never mentioned.
mhm. So, okay. We'll resume next week.